Welcome to Cracking Cooperstown, where we talk all things Baseball Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame collecting. Join us as we discuss Hall of Fame voting, autographs, cards, baseballs, resumes, and trajectories. Debate and discussion as we look to crack the code to Cooperstown. Now here's your hosts, Jake Brewer, Dom Manna.
Cracking Cooperstown, here we are. And this is one of our yearly exercises that Dom and I like to do. It's actually something I started several years ago on my own in obscurity just for fun. And I threw the idea out here to Dom when we started this podcast together. And this will be our second year doing this. And what it is, we're going to take a look at today's game, guys that are playing right now, because on average, in any given year, there are 40 players that are actively playing that will ultimately be Hall of Famers. Now, as you can guess, there'll be some guys that are slam dunks that are obvious that everyone would have on their list. There's a middle ground where, fairly confident, on track, that kind of stuff. But at the end, ultimately, you're going to pick some, very early career players that so much could happen, so much could change, not just in their career, but on a year-to-year basis. Because as Dom and I get into our list here, I know that they're not exactly the same as our 2023 version of this show. I'm excited to see who Dom included on his list, who fell off on his, and share mine as well. So Dom, how you feeling about this year's version of the 40 Hall of Fame players that are playing today?
I feel 10 times worse than I did last year. This is something that we're both very passionate about. And as Hall of Fame nuts, you're always thinking while you watch these players' careers develop, could they get into the Hall of Fame someday? And some of them, like you said, they're more obvious. They have the eye-popping numbers and awards and fame. And some of them are more unsung. And this exercise for me last year wasn't just fun because I was kicking off this awesome journey with you, but also what made me kind of sit down and be like, okay, what marks do I want to see a player hit for them to be eligible for a Hall of Famer? Because I am a bigger Hall guy, but there have been some elections of Hall of Famers that I don't particularly agree with 100%. So I wanted to find where my line in the sand is, and you all will have your own at home. Jake has a qualifier system that is for like the inner circle major milestones as automatics with very high secondary qualifiers. And I have the automatics still being the same, but I lowered my secondary ones and said that you had to get 4 of them to be worthy of checking that box confidently on a ballot in the future. So it's really fun. And it makes you watch the current game with a little more interest and a little more intrigue. But in terms of making this list this year, I am so not confident. Like 3 or 4 guys retired that were on my list last year, and 2 of them were already kind of a stretch to put on. And some guys just did not have good 2023s, whether injuries or just regressing. So it was definitely a rough list to put together, but I think it's going to be cool to see how this list evolves over time as the years go on, and the guys that we aren't just right about once, but we're right about and stick with. I think that is the more fun, because we can both sit here right now and say Mike Trout's a Hall of Famer, but guys that we put on our list and we kept them on our list as an active 40 Hall of Famer, we will be proven right or wrong one day, which is fun to think about.
It'll definitely be fun to look back as we do this year over year to see, who had such and such player on their list first and stuck with them. When did I come along and believe in a guy that you did first and things like that? Or the late bloomers are the ones you just happen to be like, I'm putting this rookie on here because I like him. And it turns out he does have that kind of career. That'll be fun to look back at. And I know for me, being a Hall of Fame collector, I'm always looking at the game from a Hall of Fame lens, including the modern game. In addition to playing fantasy, I don't look at it so much as like I'm going to buy the next hot rookie because he's hot and I'm prospecting. I look at a guy like from the standpoint of Hall of Fame prospecting, which often does not mean he's played 1 or 2 seasons. It's further along in the career, kind of that post-hype era, one of those windows we like to talk about with buying Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers. So it's cool to look at from that standpoint. But I think we've kind of established what this is, and we're going to jump right into it. Dom and I have different qualifiers. We'll talk about them throughout, but also we'll have ours kind of grouped differently with maybe some different fun names for the categories that aren't exactly the same. We don't know who the other one picked, so it'll also be fun for us to discover with you guys who's on our list of 40. So, Dom, I know we'll probably go pretty quickly through this first section, but who's your first player? Who you got?
Yeah, I name dropped him for a reason because to me he is the number one player. If everybody in the major leagues today was put on a ballot, I think Mike Trout would get the highest percentage of votes. He's in his 13th season, already has accumulated 83.8 career WAR, which is above my half qualifier of 60. And he's the best player of his generation. He's got 3 MVPs already, which is automatic for both of us. 9 Silver Sluggers, 10 All-Star appearances. He's a career 301 hitter, 372 home runs, so he's chasing 400 this season. 948 RBIs, was the 2012 AL Rookie of the Year. 5.5 qualifiers already for me, including the automatic. The 1,000 RBIs is well in the range of outcomes, and I do believe he has a chance for 500 one day. His rookie card, obviously, is the very expensive 2011 Topps Update, US 175, I believe.
And I also have Trout on my list, to no one's surprise. My first category, I labeled it guys that I'd vote for if they retired today. And Trout, I would, as I show off for those of you on YouTube, a 2012 5-star autograph of Mike Trout.
So cool.
Thanks, Tom. For me, he already hits that automatic qualifier of 3 MVPs. He's on a pace for a lot of different stuff, but that's the main reason why I would vote for him if he retired today. To go also in this same section, I'll name my first player I've got in this section, and it's Justin Verlander. I'm showing off his rookie card here. It's from 2005. I wanted to make sure I got that right. 2005 Topps. I've got the draft pick card version. But he is a guy that I would vote for because he's in the 3,000 strikeout club already. That's automatic for me. He's also possibly, if he keeps pitching like he says that he wants to, outside shot to be the last 300 game winner. Like truly last one, but he's well decorated, dominant pitcher for a long time. But he was a no-brainer. I won't even take up any more time on Verlander.
Agreed. He's got 3 Cy Youngs and an MVP as a pitcher, which counts for more for me personally. Was a Rookie of the Year, ALCS MVP, ERA titles. Like, he's done everything you want to in the sport. 80 career WAR. He is hurt right now. But like you said, I have him in my already locked and loaded kind of section, and he was my number 2 player, number 1 pitcher, I think, active as well. So we're on agreement there. Number 3, I don't know if we're still in agreement.
For those of keeping track at home, that is 257 wins for Verlander. So
I don't think he gets there, man, but it would be great if he did.
I don't either, but maybe. Who knows?
Another guy who is already locked in that is also hurt right now, Clayton Kershaw is my number 3. 17th season, 79.7 WAR, so 2 less seasons and basically the same WAR as Verlander. He's the best left-handed pitcher of his generation. He's still going strong when he's on the field. Cy Youngs as well, 5 ERA titles to go along with a pitching triple crown and 210 wins, which is going to look better and better over time. He also has an MVP as a pitcher. His career ERA is 248, and that is just amazing. He's 56 Ks away from the automatic 3,000, which will be the final feather in his Hall of Fame cap. I hope he gets that later this year. But Kershaw, I feel like he doesn't get enough love. If you look at his peak and his ERA plus and what he did during his prime, it's right up there with Lefty Grove and Randy Johnson and Pedro Martinez and Sandy Koufax and whatever peak pitcher you want to put up there. Kershaw's peak in a high run scoring era is right up there with them. So I wanted to give him his flowers.
Yeah, I love Kershaw. 2012 5-star autograph there that I'm showing off. I hope he does get those 56 strikeouts, join that elite 3,000 strikeout club. And he was just so dominant. When he was at his peak, he just seemed like he was head and shoulders amongst pitchers in that era. So I think he's a no doubter. He did get a World Series ring with the Dodgers finally, and as long as he hangs on with them, he's got a chance every year to add another ring to that trophy cabinet. So we'll see what happens with him at the latter stages of his career. Now, the next guy I've got two more in this section that I'd vote for them if they retired today. But the next one does have 3 Cy Youngs as well. He is a member of the 3,000 strikeout club. Seems to be a theme here at the top. But this is the 2008 Topps rookie card of Max Scherzer. Now, one thing from a collecting standpoint I want to touch on from Scherzer is he's not a total recluse from signing, but him and Verlander both don't have that many pack-pulled autographs. Scherzer has a few more than Verlander, but for modern era players, they are on the lower end of the spectrum as in terms of availability of their autographs for pack-pulled stuff. So just something to note if you do want to prospect some of these Hall of Fame guys.
Yeah, and Clayton Kershaw's rookie card is also in that 2008 update and highlights set. The two of them both look crazy young in their pictures. It's crazy that they're entering years 17 and 18 respectively for those guys. But Max Scherzer, I feel like he gets overlooked a little bit because of Verlander and Kershaw being in the same generation as him. But not only was his tenure with the Nationals arguably the best free agent stretch for a pitcher in the history of the sport, but he also, despite a rough start, contributed to a Texas Rangers World Series last year as well. Things like that are part of the legend of Mad Max Scherzer. So he was number 4 on my list as well. And the final guy I have on this first category, which I'm assuming is the same as you, is Mr. Zach Greinke. 21st season, 77.5 WAR. His rookie card is the 2002 Bowman Chrome, and he's somebody that needs to be signed immediately because he's 21 strikeouts away from 3,000. He has 225 career wins, 6 Gold Gloves, an American League Cy Young, and a career 3.49 ERA, which I like to see that. He did not pitch well for Kansas City last year, and they signed some other starting pitchers in his place. But walking away with 21 strikeouts away from 3,000 would be the most Zach Greinke thing of all time. So I hope that he doesn't walk away from the sport when he's that close to history, because he should be a Hall of Famer regardless. But the 3,000, I think, will really put the majority of the writers over the top.
I think if he doesn't come back, he'll be underappreciated for what he is. If he doesn't hit that 3K mark, I hope he does. He had a really low strikeout rate last year, but he messed around and almost got there in 2023. So close. But the 200 plus wins, 2,500 plus strikeouts for me, that puts him in, no doubt. That was also the last guy I had in that section too, Dom.
All right. So we haven't disagreed yet. So
we will.
So who's your top guy in the next tier?
So I didn't do so much of like truly ordering them. Mine was more by like section and grouping of like similar reasons. Like, for example, my next section, I've got it named on the doorstep / have met one of my qualifiers already, which I think puts them at a level in their career a little bit further along than some of the other guys we're going to get to later. But my first guy is someone I know that you will have on your list. I know you're a fan of him. He's one of your favorite guys for your secondary National League team. And that's none other than Nolan Arenado. And I'm showing off his Topps Chrome rookie here. This is 2013. I wanted to share that with you guys. I need to get just the base Topps version as well. I'd like to have that one. But Arenado's in my list because he does have 10 Gold Gloves. That's a secondary qualifier for me. That's what puts him in this section. But he's also just 75 homers away from 400, which would be another secondary qualifier for me. And I think he's only 4 or 5 solid seasons away from getting to 1,500 RBI at a fairly early point in his career compared to most players. He was just a run-producing machine for forever in Colorado, and has done fairly well in St. Louis so far. So he's one of the guys I'm most confident in this next section, and is probably one of the ones furthest along in his career.
Yeah, he is in his 11th season. I do have him behind one player in my next section, which is essentially there. I don't think Nolan Arenado's prime is still happening, but I think that he's had a Hall of Fame prime and is essentially there, just needs to compile a little bit more. He has 53.9 career WAR in 11 seasons, so he's averaging almost 5 WAR a year, which is awesome. And he's the best third baseman of this generation, and probably my favorite active player to watch. He is so fun on both sides of the ball, plays it hard, and like you said, he's a run-producing machine. Already in 11 seasons, he has 1,066 RBIs, which meets my qualifier of 1,000. He has 325 career home runs and 5 Silver Sluggers. He's signed through 2027, so he will get to 400. He might even get to 500 depending on how long he plays, and he's on pace to hit my qualifiers of hits with 1682 and runs with 877. I don't know, based off of his 2023 performance, if he's going to be someone that has 10 all-star appearances and a WAR over 60, but he definitely has that in his range of outcomes still. He's a hell of a player.
So who's the guy that you have above Arenado on your list in this section, Dom?
It is Mr. Marcus Lynn Betts. Mookie Betts, 12th season, 66.5 career WAR. You'll love to see that. He's more of a qualitative Hall of Famer currently than quantitative, but he's been sneaky having some amazing statistical seasons. He joined the Dodgers and started drinking their secret stuff. 6 Gold Gloves and 6 Silver Sluggers in 12 years. He scored his 1,000th run last season. That's already 3.5 qualifiers for me. He signed through 2032. He has 257 career home runs. He'll get to my qualifier of 300 during that span. He has 767 RBIs. He'll get to my qualifier of 1,000. And he has 7 all-star appearances. I think he's going to have 10 plus. The reason I have him above 2 especially is he's already won the World Series in both leagues. He's won the MVP in the American League, and I picked him both last year and this year to be the first player since Frank Robinson to win an MVP in both leagues. He is that good of a player, and the fact that he is now playing above average league shortstop when he played his entire career in the outfield prior, just a really special player that I think is kind of that next guy after the automatics.
And I don't have Mookie Betts in the same section, but only because he hasn't actually hit one of my qualifiers yet. Mine are a little bit higher than Dom's. As a reminder, I have small hall tendencies, even though I do like the qualifiers, the counting stats, that kind of thing. But Mookie Betts is one of the most decorated players we'll talk about today. Like Dom mentioned, he ran down the list that's in his trophy case. But for me, he's still just 31 years old. He's got time to get to the 1,800 run milestone, which is automatic qualifier for me. That's elite company. And he's very likely to hit some of the other qualifying levels for me too, like 400 home runs, 2,500 hits. Ironically, I put in here that he's a really good bet to get there. So I do have him on my list, even though he's in the next section for me. I don't have any cards to show off for him. So Dom, I'll let you tell the people what his rookie card is out there.
Yes.
So you have one.
So Mookie Betts' key rookie is the 2014 Topps update, which I still need to get myself. I unfortunately don't have that. There was a buying period, and I just wasn't buying Modern at the time. Right now is not the good time to buy it because he has been the hottest hitter in the National League to open up the season. So Marcus Lynn Betts, a good bet if you're Hall of Fame prospecting with current players for sure.
No doubt. So my next player in the section where he has met at least one qualifier, it's not automatic because he's got 2. But if he gets a third, he'll be automatic for 3 MVPs. And that's Bryce Harper. Okay. And going into this season, he was a lot closer to Mike Trout's counting stats than you might think. For the most part, Harper has stayed healthier than Trout, and it's allowed him to catch up and make up some ground on him. Now, Trout's off to a hot start this year, so that's helping to keep that gap there. But if something else happens, Harper could wind up with better counting stats than Trout, which sounds crazy to say, but it's possible. I'm showing his 2013 five-star autograph here. He has the 2 MVPs. He's also currently on pace to hit secondary qualifiers for me of home runs, which is 400, hits, which is 2,500, runs of 1,500, and RBIs of 1,500. That's nothing to sneeze at if he hits those markers. There's not a ton of players that can say they've done all 4 and added the hardware to go along with it. I think Harper, in terms of modern players that isn't at the end of their career, one of the safest guys to Hall of Fame prospect on. If nothing else, you've got a multi-time MVP winner adding to your collection. Hard to go wrong with that.
I'm actually surprised that you're technically higher on Bryce Harper than me, even though he is in the same section. He is a little buried because while the peak is really good, the 2 MVPs and stuff like that, he's missed a good amount of time. Not saying that Mike Trout hasn't, but Mike Trout's per 162s have been out of a higher quality than Bryce Harper when healthy. Bryce Harper, though, he already meets 3.5 of my qualifiers. He is awesome. 46.3 WAR in his career. And I don't think he gets enough credit because he is essentially the LeBron James of baseball. He was absolutely hyped from a ridiculously young age to be the next great baseball player. And he's came into the league, and while he hasn't won a championship yet, he's led teams to World Series. He's won multiple MVPs, Rookie of the Year. He has 309 career home runs and 1,000 runs scored. So those are qualifiers for me. Really awesome player. And the age in his contract, he should be able to get the rule of 2,000. He's at 1,522 hits. He will get 1,000 RBIs. He has 896, and he'll probably be a 10-time All-Star. He's currently at 7. But I don't think his health allows him to get 3,000 hits, and it might not get him 500 home runs either, depending on his health. The move to first base should help with that, but I don't know if it will because he has had a ton of injuries over the years.
Mm-hmm. And I'm confident more so in those secondary qualifiers, kind of like you're talking about. I doubt he gets to 3K hits and 500 homers, but I feel pretty good about him getting to 2,500 hits and 400 plus homers. He's just 91 away from 400. And if he keeps his current pace in the last couple of years on, manages to stay healthy at first base, pretty good odds. And to be clear, I'm not more on the Bryce Harper train than I am the Mike Trout train, just to be clear. But I think that the gap is not as big as people think that it is.
The hobby gap is certainly big. The 2011 update Trout sells for a lot more than the 2012 update Bryce Harper. And there's a reason why I own one and not the other.
And even in 5-star autographs, the gap is big, something I'm very familiar with. Even though they're similar numbered, that kind of thing, the gap is pretty big between Harper and Trout, which is interesting. And Trout, no one hates him because he's vanilla, and Harper is polarizing, so some people hate him. So there you go. But
no,
who you got next, Dom?
Then you'll like the next guy in my essentially their section that I have ahead of Harper, and that's Freddie Freeman. 15th season, 56.3 career WAR. He's just a model of consistency, man. Not only did 2023 was a big year for Freddie Freeman in terms of my qualifiers. He recorded his 2,000th hit, his 300th home run, his 1,000th RBI, and 1,000th run scored in 2023. Those are 4 of my qualifiers. He qualified them all. He could retire tomorrow, and I would check the box. But he's signed through 2027, so he's not only on pace to add to those numbers, but he can also get my Silver Slugger qualifier of 5. He currently has 3, and he's going to have a WAR over 60 when he retires. He's at 56.3 right now. Freddie Freeman, he's, I think, going to get more unsung now with Mookie Betts and now Shohei Ohtani in Dodger Blue, but he's truly a great first baseman, and I just don't know why his card prices, his 2011 tops, is so much cheaper than some of these other guys that we've been talking about.
It hurts my heart as a Braves fan. Still, almost 2 years removed. I'm warming up to Matt Olson as being a part of the team, but Freddie was special and is likely on a Hall of Fame trajectory. I have him in the group down where he hasn't met one of my qualifiers yet, but he's very close. All the accolades that you mentioned, but I think he is on pace for could crack 400 home runs, 2,500 hits, and 1,500 runs and RBIs like Harper, which is crazy to say. And he does have an MVP already, is more likely to win championships, as much as I hate saying that, with the Dodgers going forward than Harper is with the Phillies, in my opinion. But he's a great, great player. And I've got several Freddie autographs, being a Braves fan. Here's one I don't get to show off often. It's actually a Topps marquee, which was the precursor to Topps Museum. And that's a very young Freddie Freeman there autograph. His autographs have went up a fair amount for a guy that's not like super heralded in the hobby. I remember even when he was a rookie and he was somewhat heralded and on a popular team with the Braves, you could get him for $20-$30. And most autographs now you see for Freddie are more in the 50-60 range. So he's a guy that if you are a Hall of Fame prospector type guy and you want someone that's safer than, a rookie type deal, Freddie Freeman's a good autograph to buy, especially when he is on the same team with Betts and Ohtani. He's not super hyped right now, unless somehow he's the guy that ends up winning the MVP from their team. That's unlikely to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, as a first baseman, winning the MVP in a 162-game season looks harder and harder to do. He did so in the 2020 shortened season, so that is a nice little feather in his cap. But I think he's more about the overall package than the hardware, and I think that's kind of why, like you said, he's a little bit undervalued hobby-wise. So who's next on your list?
All right, next on my list, I've still got some that have met at least one of my qualifiers, so I'm gonna sort of go back to that section. The next guy, I actually mentioned on a live stream this past week that we did with Sammy Thunder on his show, where we did kind of a live version of Cracking Cooperstown episode. Go check that out if you haven't. We had a great time with Sammy, but he wanted us to pick a player that we think will be a Hall of Famer at each position. And I said that I couldn't pick one that was retired, but I can pick one that's active, because I believe the next Hall of Fame second baseman is Jose Altuve. And I don't have any cards to show of him. I don't have any yet, but he has 3 batting titles already. And I do think he does need to beef up the stats a little bit on the backside of his career. I mean, he's really close to 8 All-Stars, to 10 All-Stars with 8, and 2 7 Silver Sluggers with 6 qualifiers for me. He's on a great pace. And while he does have the involvement with the trash can stealing scandal, did he have a monitor on him? All that stuff. We'll be 20 years removed from that almost when he's on the ballot. He's just under 300 stolen bases. He's over 2,000 hits already. The Astros are a consistent winner. If he's able to put up a fairly decent back end of his 30s and play closer to 40, I think he's going to hit some of those milestones and be a Hall of Famer and one of the best second basemen of this generation, if not the best.
Yeah, Altuve is the last player I have ahead of Harper in this section. I do have 2 more players in this pretty much already essentially their section. But Altuve, like you said, 50.4 career WAR in 14 seasons. He already has 2,000 hits and 1,000 runs scored, which matter to me. That paired with the batting titles, that's already 3 out of 4 qualifiers to check the box. And like you said, he's close on the All-Stars, and he just signed an extension with Houston for 5 more years. He should be able to get to my qualifier at home runs. He's at 212 right now, and my qualifier at RBIs, he's at 750. And like you said, sneaky base stealer, 293 career stolen bases. He gets to 300. That'll matter for me too. Second base is super underrepresented in the Hall of Fame. And I think even with the scandal, he will be a very strong case. 2011 Topps update is the card to get for Jose Altuve jumping into someone's arms.
And presuming that, he gets to a Hall of Fame resume, otherwise it will be interesting someday to see how he's treated on the ballot, if the scandal will affect him or not, or how much it will or won't. So that'll be fun to take a look at down the road.
Agreed. And the next guy I have in the essentially their section, this is now below Harper, but still in the same pocket. Paul Goldschmidt, 14th season, 61.5 WAR. His MVP in 2022, I think, put the more casual community on notice that like this guy might be a Hall of Famer. But he's been one of the NL's best hitters for a decade. 5 Silver Sluggers, that matters to me. 341 home runs, that matters to me. 1128 RBIs, excuse me, and 1,138 runs scored with a WAR over 60, 4.5 qualifiers. He turns 36 this season as a free agent this offseason, but all he has to do to me is compile the 83 hits he needs for the Rule of 2000. He's a shoo-in. One Gold Glove Award, too, at first base would help his case as well to get into 5. But he's someone that is completely overlooked. And like you said, with Arenado being looked at as this amazing player, which he is, it kind of overshadows Goldschmidt. There have been times where Arenado made a play that didn't seem humanly possible, but the throw, even though he threw it a ridiculous distance, wasn't like straight on the money in Goldschmidt's chest. And Goldschmidt has made some amazing plays at first base. The Cardinals are my National League team, so I follow them and see a lot of footage and radio calls. Goldschmidt is such a smart defensive first baseman. He is such a good base runner for a first baseman. So he has the analytical love for being an all-around player, as well as the counting stats to me that make it worthy, even if he didn't have his 2022 NL MVP.
I think that MVP does mean a lot for what is likely to be we'll say, borderline case. I don't think he's a slam dunk. I don't think he's a no when all is said and done. I do think that I hope that his last years here in St. Louis, and then hopefully on another contract, that he will able to get to that 400 threshold home runs. I think that will matter for him to kind of go along with the other things that we've been talking about. But the card that I have for Goldschmidt, I actually have his first Bowman Chrome here. That is the 2011 first Bowman Chrome, which, Dom, in this era, there's flagship rookies, but there's also their first Bowman Chrome. Mm-hmm. Do you think, I'll just ask a hobby question here, do you think that both matter? One matters more than the other? Or what do you think between the first Bowman and the flagship rookie?
I definitely think both matter. And I am interested to see if the first Bowman, which for a long time was a big craze in the hobby, ends up having a renaissance later on as the people that are our age kind of grow up and get back into the hobby in different ways. Because those were chase cards for a lot of the time that's his first card. But I do think flagship will always be the key. Goldschmidt is in that loaded 2011 Topps product as well. So there's a lot of great rookies in there. And his cards are extremely cheap. His autographs are extremely affordable. A guy who, like we said, Freddie Freeman, not the sexiest hot new player to prospect for the Hall of Fame, but if you want a pretty safe bet to get into the Hall of Fame for a guy that's had a really, really great career, Paul Goldschmidt fits that same kind of bill.
So my next guy that I've still got a couple more here in this. They've met at least one qualifier before. We're going to go back to a pitcher. Now he's currently hurt, and this does knock down his pace because of this injury. I don't have a card to show of him, but Garrett Cole has less than 65 wins to get away from 200 wins. At his age, he's at 33 years old now. He's on a good team, on a long-term contract with the Yankees. I think he's going to get those 65 wins. And I believe that not necessarily automatic like 300. I think 200 for the modern pitcher is going to be a new key threshold number. He's also already cracked 2,000 strikeouts, so he's on a great pace to get to that 3K as long as he can come back from this injury, be healthy, and be a good percentage of at least what the player he was before. Outside of the lock guys and a unicorn I know we're both going to talk about later on in this episode, Cole's the pitcher that I would put my money on as a Hall of Famer right now outside of that top tier.
He is definitely the safest bet but I don't want to disrespect Cole, but there is an insane gap between the guys we talked about in the lock section to Cole. And 100%. I do think that the best, you never want to see a pitcher like Cole get hurt. But the best time for you to get hurt is coming off of your first career Cy Young. Because like you said with Goldschmidt, that hardware does matter to the more general Hall of Fame voters and fans. And him finally having that in his trophy case should shoulder some sort of struggles through this injury. He is a fantastic pitcher. His rookie card is 2014 Topps update. And like you said, I think that pushing 3,000 strikeouts is going to be more of the milestone than 300 wins over time. And he's on pace for that. And 200 wins will be a respectable amount, I think, as the decades go on as well. So he is a fantastic pick if you can't maybe afford or don't want to go in or already have Scherzer, Greinke, Verlander, Kershaw. He's the next best bet. With the pitching injuries that we've seen across the league and the pitch clock and things like that, we don't know what the future of the pitching in the Hall of Fame is going to be. That'll probably be a future Crack in Cooperstown episode like we do with catchers. But we got to see how these modern cases get looked at over time and where their final stats fall, because the innings and wins that we're typically used to seeing are not currently happening with the way the game's played today. But Garrett Cole, definitely safely on my list, and I think he is pacing very well.
Well, and it's a good time to buy Cole if you believe in him that he's a future Hall of Famer. While he's hurt and nobody's talking about Garrett Cole, it's a good time to go pick up a rookie card, go pick up an autograph.
Yeah, and if you're into getting the PSA 10, which sometimes I do with some of these modern guys, if the deal is just too good to pass up, his PSA 10 rookie cards, even before the injury, you could get for sub $100. You definitely can get them for sub $100 now. So if you want to make a bet on a Hall of Fame pitcher, he is probably the best buy right now.
So who have you got next, Dom?
The last guy in my Essentially There section is Mr. Manny Machado. 13th season, 54.7 career WAR. He's someone that I've had a kind of internal growth with, because he was a villain when he was in Baltimore, especially for Red Sox fans, shortening Dustin Pedroia's career. He was looked at as a dirty player, but he's grown up a little bit and he's become a more respected veteran in the San Diego clubhouse and community. And right now he only meets one of my qualifiers. He has 315 career home runs, but he's signed for the next decade. They just re-extended his long contract, and he has 1,751 hits. He'll have well over 2,000. He has 951 RBIs and 925 runs scored. So he's going to hit those two qualifiers this year, 1,000 apiece. And he's going to have a WAR over 60 because he's a great two-way player with the glove and with the bat. He also is very likely to be a 10-time All-Star. He currently has 6, but he's signed for another 12 years. So I think he can make an All-Star once every 3 years the rest of the way to get there. And outside of Jose Altuve, I think he has the best chance of getting 3,000 hits for any active player. I don't know if there's a current active player that's even going to get 3,000 hits. I wouldn't be putting strong money on anybody, but to me, it's Altuve, it's Machado, and then it's dart throws for kids in their 20s.
I will agree with most of what you've said because I've been on the Machado train longer than you. I remember having this conversation last year, and I talked very highly of Machado, and you've come around to him a little bit, warmed up to him some.
He was on my list last year.
He was on your list, but I was a little more positive on his outlook than you were, because I do believe that he's the next guy to get to 3,000 hits. That's just my feel on it, my read on it. And so I've actually had this card for a while. It's the 2013 Topps Manny Machado rookie. I've also probably a little biased towards him because I had him in fantasy baseball for many years in his Baltimore days. So I always loved having Machado. Always thought he was underrated, underappreciated. And I think he's going to end up compiling, which is a good word, not a negative word, compiling a Hall of Fame career and hitting a lot of these numbers that both Dom and I like to see in a Hall of Fame resume.
Yeah, he's behind the guys that I've named, but he's closer than a lot of other players.
Mm-hmm. Now, my next guy, I still have him in the section where he has hit at least one of my qualifiers, because this player does have over 400 home runs. I thought about putting him in a different section, but he's a little farther along than the other two guys that will be in that section I'll talk about later. He is a Yankee. I don't have a card of him, but at the time of this video, Giancarlo Stanton is 95 homers away from 500. He's 34 years old. Can he stay healthy enough to get there? That's the question. Could he arguably be a Hall of Famer without getting to that level? Possibly. But I think if he does stay healthy enough to get to those, 95 more home runs and gets to 500, how do you not put him in? Outside of anyone linked allegedly or actually to PEDs, you hit 500 home runs, you're in the Hall. So I think that I'm the optimist. I'm the eternal optimist. But I want him to get there. I want him to get to 500 home runs, even as a Yankee, and become a Hall of Famer, a slam dunk Hall of Famer. Now, you may have him a little lower on the list, but I feel fairly confident that you've got Stanton somewhere on your list of 40, Dom.
Stanton is included. He is technically not in the next tier. He's in the second to next tier, because I do have a player that has a tier of his own next.
Okay.
But he's at the top of the chasing an automatic tier, because that's really what his case is. Is he going to hit 500 home runs? If he doesn't, his case looks a lot less good. Mm-hmm. But I've said this before, the ball sounds different coming off of his bat. He is, when he's healthy, is an amazing watch in the batter's box, like truly scary, like truly great. And I think that because of Aaron Judge, who came along as a better overall player in the same frame,
agree,
he's been a little bit overshadowed, especially being on the same team, and undervalued and unappreciated. So his rookie card is 2010 Topps update. It's also a very affordable card in a PSA 10. And if he gets 500 home runs, he is a very safe shot of making the Hall of Fame. So I like Giancarlo Stanton.
And one more fun fact on Stanton that I saw this week that I found really interesting. I don't know if this is more about how bad the Marlins are or about how good Stanton is, but since 2017, 7 years ago, when Stanton left the Marlins, the leader in home runs for the Marlins between 2017 and 2024 is Giancarlo Stanton with his last total in Miami. How unbelievable is that?
Yeah, I feel bad for Marlins fans for sure. That things have not been great there, and he did have a historic final season in Miami with 59 home runs, a career high. The next guy I have, though, he's had a lot of iconic moments already, and he's in a tier of his own because he is a unicorn, and that's Shohei Ohtani. After the guys that I just named, I could not list a single other guy as a more likely Hall of Famer than Shohei Ohtani, and it's because we haven't seen anything like that before. His extension with the Dodgers guarantees that he will play 10 seasons, making him Hall of Fame eligible, which means he is a Hall of Famer. And if you laugh, more than welcome to. In 7 seasons, he has 35.2 career WAR. That's 5 a season. That's amazing. He's a unicorn. We're blessed to be able to watch him play. I don't think he gets talked about enough, which is crazy. But he's a peak case. He's won 2 MVPs, 2022 and 2023, as well as AL Rookie of the Year. You can consider those pitching MVPs technically, because he pitched as a frontline starter in both of them. But even if you don't, he's a half and half player. So I cut his statistical qualifications for me down 25%, not 50%, down 25%. So he has a decade in Dodger blue. He would need 100 wins to meet that qualifier for me then. He's at 38. He would need 1,200 strikeouts. He has 608. But I think the hitting ones are slam dunks for him to hit, regardless of how he returns as a pitcher. He would need 1,500 career hits to be worthy in that category for me. He has 702. He would need 225 home runs. He has 174. He would need 750 RBIs. He has 445. And he would need 750 runs scored. He has 440. If he's able to win any more MVPs or Cy Youngs, it only adds to the legend of Shohei Ohtani, the kid you are most likely to tell your grandkids that you got to watch play.
I also have Ohtani on my list. Shocker. However, he is in my he's already met one qualifier category because he does have 2 MVPs. Now, he's a special case. I'm not going to reiterate everything that Dom said. The only card I have is his rookie debut rookie card. I need to upgrade that. I'd like to get both the hitting and the pitching versions of his base rookie card from Flagship. That would be fantastic. Be a great way to commemorate the uniqueness of his career. But even with my higher standards than Dom, I took a similar approach. I'm gonna list off those numbers only to give you context that it's within the realm of possibility that he even meets a higher standard that I lay out for Ohtani. Now, like Dom mentioned, he's more likely to hit the hitting, milestones that we're talking about. But if he gets somewhere remotely close to 300-ish homers, 1,750 hits, 250 plus stolen bases, because the man does run. I mean, he's already stolen some bases this year, even coming off the arm injury. He's still running. 1,000 RBIs, 1,000 runs, 100 wins, same threshold there, Dom, and 2,000 strikeouts. I mean, how could he not be a Hall of Famer?
If he gets all those things you just listed, he will be considered the greatest player of all time.
Possibly.
I feel like your standards are that high.
They are high.
If he meets them all, he's the greatest player ever. No question.
And they're intentionally high because of the way that I look at the Hall of Fame, right? I care more about those milestone numbers. They matter a lot to me. Peak doesn't matter as much in my way of thinking. And even then, we don't know what he's going to be. We don't know how he'll be looked at because he's so unique. Like, where do you draw the line? It could be where you do. It could be where I do. It could be somewhere in between. It could be lower than what you drew the line at that makes him a Hall of Famer. What if he comes back and pitches, a couple more seasons, wins 2 Cy Youngs?
Well, that's what I said. Him
retires the next day. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, we can have our thresholds for him all we want, but as soon as he inked that deal with the Dodgers to guarantee he would play 10 major league seasons, that pretty much sealed it for me. Like, he's gonna get into the Hall of Fame pretty much regardless of where his numbers fall, but that's kind of where I would compare him threshold wise to how I look at other people, is knocking it down 25%. Since my numbers are already, like you said, a little generous in some areas, but you do have to hit multiple secondary qualifiers to be worthy. If you just sneak in one, that's not going to really make your case. So Shohei Ohtani, go watch him, tell your kids about him, and focus on it because it's truly unbelievable.
One last question on Ohtani. Yes, no question.
Mm-hmm.
Retires tomorrow. Do you vote for him for the Hall of Fame?
He can't get in.
I know.
Unless they made a special exemption, he can't get in.
For this question, throw out the 10-year rule. I know that, but throw out.
I would.
You would. Okay.
I would.
Interesting.
Because if it's 10 for normal players, because he played both, I feel like they'd be like, well, he played over 5 years as a two-way player in the major leagues. Mm-hmm. He played 5 years as a pitcher and 5 years as a hitter.
Okay. We'll move on to the next player. I have 2 more that have met one of my secondary qualifiers that I'll talk about that I'm still in this section. I'm going to couple them together because they play the same position. They're not a position we're going to see on here very often. I don't have cards for either one of them, and it'll save us a little time. So they're separated by just 1 year in age. They are very close in the statistic that matters to me, and that is 400 plus saves. That is both Kenley Jansen, who is 1 year older, and Craig Kimbrell, who is 1 year younger than Jansen. Now, 400 is a secondary qualifier for me. they're unlikely to meet the strikeout numbers, the win totals, the hardware with all-stars, Cy Youngs, any of that. Really, for both of them, for me, they're 500 saves or bust. They have reached 400, so they make my list. But will either of them get there? They're both going to have to perform late in their 30s. They're both going to have to hold on to closer roles late in their 30s, which so far in 2024, they both have saves. They're both still recording saves. So we'll see. Now, this may be the first time that we disagree, Dom. I don't know if you've got these guys on the list, but what do you think about Jansen and Kimbrel?
They made my list. They're just lower. And it's because I wouldn't vote for them unless they got 5,000, 500 saves. 500 saves.
500 saves.
But what I was going to say is, to me, I did make a qualifier for relievers of 1,000 strikeouts in their career because they pitched significantly less innings than a starting pitcher. And there's only 14 starting pitchers 14 relief pitchers in history that have 1,000 plus strikeouts. So it is relatively elite company in terms of that.
And they both do. They both do have 1,000.
They're both in that club, as is Aroldis Chapman, who I kept on my list just barely because he helped the Texas Rangers win a World Series last year, and he has over 300 career saves, and he was like the first guy to hit 105. There's a lot of things about Aroldis Chapman that could get a vote someday, but those three closers to me won't be worthy unless they get 500 saves. But because of Billy Wagner's likely election next year through the writers, I think that at least Jansen and Kimbrel will get in, possibly even Chapman, because of the way that Billy Wagner is getting treated with a guy that has 422 saves and over 1,000 strikeouts. Kimbrel and Jansen are cut from that same cloth, and Chapman's not that far off.
And Kimbrel and Jansen, because they respectively are at 423 saves for Jansen, 418 for Kimbrel at the time of this recording. They're going to be higher than Wagner in terms of total saves. Now, Chapman's the first player we disagree on. I don't have him on my list, but I agree with you that he's just a rung right below them and does have an outside shot at 500, making it reasonable for him to be on a list if you're looking at relief pitchers.
Chapman's not getting 500 saves.
I don't think so either.
He might get Hall of Fame votes. That's why he made my list.
Maybe.
So for these relievers, if you're interested, it will not cost you an arm and a leg to buy these guys' cards. Kenley Jansen is 2010 Topps Update. So he has a Dodgers rookie card there. Craig Kimbrel has a 2011 Topps Update. That 2011 class is loaded. And Aroldis Chapman, I believe, is just 2011 Topps Series 1. So those are the sweet spot of when those three guys came up. They came up around the same time. They've all been really great relievers. Will they be Hall of Fame relievers? That's yet to be seen, but I think all three of them will get some levels of support.
So at this point in the podcast, we've got to stick to our name and keep it going. Something we do every single episode. Part of the reason why we're called Cracking Cooperstown is I'm going to crack a slab. Now, the card that I chose today is one that was actually gifted to me by a fellow YouTuber, a YouTube Sports Card Hall of Famer, Dave's Midlife Card Crisis. He gave me this 1992 Topps prospect card of Chipper Jones in a CSG slab. And this is the first time that I've ever cracked a CSG slab. So we'll see how it goes, Dom.
Yeah, amazing gift there. You were a little choppy on my side, so I'm not sure if that was in the recording or just my computer. So if you want to repeat where you got that slab from, I'm not sure if it got in. But
I got it from Dave's Midlife Card Crisis.
Sweet. Fellow fantasy baseball league mate of ours. So he's a really great guy. And Chipper Jones, if he was on this list of active Hall of Famers, he would be right there in the kind of lock top of second section category. Like, he was a very obvious Hall of Famer to the majority of people, first ballot, great player. And of course, Jake loves him because he played his entire career for the Atlanta Braves. But Chipper Jones is part of elite company as well. He is one of 4 switch hitters with over 400 career home runs. Jake, I've said this before. Do you know the other 3?
Switch hitters, 400 plus career home runs. Mickey Mantle.
Yep.
Mike Schmidt.
Mike Schmidt's not a switch hitter.
Oh, not Mike Schmidt. That was a different trivia question. Eddie Murray?
Eddie Murray.
There's one more.
And a guy that's on the ballot right now that we both believe belongs.
Guy on the ballot right now we both believe belongs. Sorry, I'm so focused on cracking this slab. I'm having a hard time.
That's okay. I typically just talk while you do this, but I thought it would be more interactive.
Beltran.
Yep, Carlos Beltran. So Chipper Jones is an elite category there, has an MVP. Really, really great career for my buddy's favorite player that he watched growing up. And I'm hoping that Chipper is freed from his CSG slab. Looks good.
Chipper has been freed.
Awesome.
There he is. I have to take a picture for my Instagram with that slab. I've cracked that one now. I love doing that. That's so fun.
Yeah, that was a crack in Cooperstown first. He had never cracked a CSG slab. So that is great work by you, my friend. You are slowly checking off your hit list.
We've got Beckett. We've done PSA, SGC, and CSG now. That one actually cracked pretty easy. That wasn't too bad. But now we can continue on with today's episode of Cracking Cooperstown. So let's see.
Yeah, absolutely.
I put in those relief pitchers, so you're up, Don.
Yeah, my next tier is called New School Darlings. And they are just, I think they're both deserving. I don't know how the second one is going to be received, but I'm going to talk about both of them. The first is Joey Votto, 17th season, 64.5 WAR, 2,135 hits, 356 home runs, 1,144 RBIs, and 1,171 runs scored with a WAR over 60. That's 4.5 qualifiers. That's deserving in my book. I'm wondering if his comeback attempt in Toronto will help or hurt his case. If he has a few nice years in Toronto, I think it'll make him a first ballot guy, but he's deserving regardless. The other one is Andrew McCutchen, 16th season, 48.3 WAR, so not quite as analytically valuable. But I think when he returned to Pittsburgh last season, people started remembering how good of a player he was and how good of a teammate he's been over the years. He has over 2,000 career hits, averaged over 1,000 runs scored and RBIs, and is one measly homer away from 300, which qualifies for me. He's got a 2013 NL MVP in his back pocket, and I think between him being a good guy and having a great career will get him some serious consideration from the writers. I expect it to be mixed compared to Votto, that I expect to be a lot stronger of a case and push for him. But I think both of those guys are very similar in the new school darling. If they retired 20 years ago, they wouldn't be looked at the way that they are going to look at when they hang it up eventually. Joey Votto's rookie card is 2002 Bowman Chrome, the same as Zach Greinke's, and Andrew McCutchen is in that 2005 top set, just like Justin Verlander. So you can go and pick up their rookie cards relatively affordable, and they're guys that are a lot closer to the Hall of Fame than some of the other guys we're about to talk about.
I do have Joey Votto on my list, albeit all the way down at 35, because his case is very much a qualitative case. He will be looked at differently now and going forward as opposed to in the past, like Don mentioned. He was an on-base machine. The quality of his numbers were very good. Unfortunately for Votto, somewhat of a late starter as far as, peak numbers. So he wasn't able to get to some of those, milestones that we like to see. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if he's a Hall of Famer someday. McCutchen, however, I believe definitely won't get it on the writers, in my opinion, that he is an interesting era committee candidate. But once he falls into that, I think there are a lot of people in front of him in line. And unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be able to compile enough numbers here at the tail end to get to 2,500 hits or obviously 400 homers with, one away at 300. He does have the MVP. He was considered one of the best in the game for many years in his first stint in Pittsburgh. I wouldn't vote for him, and he's actually one of the 6 guys that fell off my list from last year. I actually kicked out McCutchen. That kind of hurts because I like him, but he's not on my list for this season. So that's the second one we've disagreed on there. Now, I am finally into my next section. Ironically, we named them similarly. I named this section More Than Sophomore Young Stars. Now, these guys that I'm going to talk about in this section, for me, there are 4 players. I will go one by one, just doing one this time. But they are past their sophomore season, but are considered some of the bright young stars that I would bet on because of their pace. And if our friend Jared over at Average Braves Fan is listening, here we go. Ronald Acuna Jr., okay, last year's NL MVP. I'm showing his rookie card, not the bat down rookie, which is a variation of his flagship rookie that's worth much more, but that's 2018 tops for Ronnie. It's still super early, obviously, but he is on pace. Granted, early, small sample size, all that. He is on pace to crack 500 home runs, 3,000 hits, 1,800 runs, which are all the elite level, the automatic qualifier for me. And also on pace for 1,500 RBI and 500 stolen bases as secondary qualifiers. Not even Trout, not even Mike Trout is on pace to do that, mainly since he's not running anymore. Acuna's still just 26, and with the new stolen base rule, he could be a truly, truly generational player. He's the first ever 40-70 player in history, and he could add a similar slash line to his resume this year. I correctly predicted he would win his first MVP in 2023, and I think even if he doesn't win one this year, that he will compete for the MVP for years to come in the National League.
When Acuna is healthy, he is arguably the most electric player in baseball. There is no argument about that. Health has been a little bit of a concern early on, so I do worry about him staying healthy long enough to hit all of those milestones that you said he's technically on pace to do, but he is electric. I know you said you didn't put yours in like order you'd vote for them. This tier of young guys, which I'm assuming we're going to have at least 2 of the same 4 names, is a little bit later in my list just because they haven't accumulated as much stats. So I'm going to skip down to that section just so we're on pace with you. But I do have a section of guys that are a little more tenured ahead of them for now, even though these guys have the talent to do so. And the next guy is Juan Soto, who I'm assuming you also have. Juan Soto, I actually have him 1 spot ahead of Acuna on my list. At the top of this tier, he's in his 7th season, 29.5 career WAR. So he's got 4 more WAR than Acuna, partially for playing more games. He's been compared as the next Ted Williams, and I've never went that far, but his fantastic start to his career has generated those kind of comparisons for a reason. He's 25 years old. There's guys getting called up to the major leagues that are older than him. He has 4 Silver Sluggers, a batting title, a 162 game average, of a 285 batting average, 422 on base, and 525 slugging, with 161 hits, 33 home runs, 101 RBIs, and 109 runs scored. He's won a Gold Glove. He's just a lock, I think, for 10 All-Stars, over 60 WAR, and hitting my qualifiers in all the typical hitting categories. And I predict that he will win his first MVP in New York this year. I picked him as my 2024 AL MVP. His rookie card is obviously the 2018 Topps update. Yep.
Sure. I also have Soto on my list. Really the only difference between the two, Soto's a year younger than Acuna. His plate discipline is better than Acuna. But Acuna steals bases while Soto that's not really his game. He'll steal a few bags, but not anything prolific like Acuna. Otherwise, they're on pace for a lot of similar things. They're 2 of the most exciting young stars in the game.
So outside of the stolen bases, I think that the only thing that Ronald Acuna can accomplish that Juan Soto can't is 3,000 hits. because Juan Soto walks too damn much. He will never have 3,000 hits because he refuses to hit when pitches are not good. Like, that's how much of a machine he is. But that's not going to ding him when it comes Hall of Fame voting time.
And where they, again, slight differentiation, Acuna's going to get more of those counting stats, those milestones, where Soto, qualitatively is probably going to look a little bit better in the end. So they're very interesting, two different dynamic there.
Mm-hmm.
The next guy that I've got in my same section, more than sophomore young stars, I'm actually going to talk about one of your boys, Dom. Now, this year so far in 2024, he needs to pick it up because he is ticking me off for my fantasy teams. I have him in both leagues.
You drafted him real high, too.
God, he's killing me. I don't have any cards to show of him, but it's your boy, Rafael Devers. And he's off to an incredible start at a young age. He's 27. He's also on pace, small sample size, on pace to hit 500 home runs, 3,000 hits, 1,800 RBIs, which are all automatic qualifiers. And it's crazy to say that for yet another player. Granted, he's got to do it for a long amount of time. But Devers is one of the least talked about young stars in the league, partially, no offense, Dom, because the Red Sox currently suck. I know, I'm sorry. Tear runs down Dom's face. At least they signed him to a long-term extension and he's staying in Boston. But I've definitely got Devers on my list. It wasn't hard to put him on here.
No, Devers stayed on my list, and he's in this section for me as well. I did lower him in terms of number as he was last season. He was 24 for me last year, and now he's 27 on my list in terms of who I'd vote for. And that's because I think he's going to switch to designated hitter a little earlier than I was expecting. I thought he would play a clean 10, 12 years at third base before he's a full-time DH, but it's not looking like that's going to be the case sustainably. I think they're going to have to move him to DH, maybe even this season. It's been pretty bad at third base with his shoulder problems he's been having, and the hitting, which is what they're paying him to do, has suffered, I think, from being able to try to do things on the defensive side of the ball. But like you said, his 162 game average right now is 279, 343 on base, and a 508 slug with 102 runs scored, 176 hits, 33 homers, and 106 RBIs at 27 years old. He's playing in a very hitter-friendly ballpark for left-handed hitters, and outside of Soto is probably the best young hitter in the game in terms of approach and what he can do when he barrels up a baseball. So I love watching him play, and the Red Sox, they're building something around him, but I don't know if his prime is going to line up with what they're building currently.
Who's next on your list then, Dom?
The last guy in this section for me is kind of similar to Rafi, where he's a little down right now, and that's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is my last one in that category. 6th season, 15.5 WAR, not great being a first baseman there, but he's had high expectations since he entered the league, and he's delivered at least offensively. 162 game average of 274 batting average, 354 on base, 489 slug with 172 hits, 32 home runs, 98 RBIs, and 92 runs scored at 25 years old. Well ahead of the curve. He's won a Gold Glove and a Silver Slugger. I don't know if he's going to be able to get 5 of either, but it's nice that he has that hardware. He had an MVP caliber season all the way back in 2021. That feels like it's very far away, but he potentially could get hot like that again and win an MVP. Just talent-wise, he has to be a relatively confident bet. I don't know how he's going to age. I don't know if he's going to be a Blue Jay for life, but Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is kind of the right-handed hitting Devers in terms of a Hall of Fame prospecting aspect.
And the key for him definitely is that he produced at a high level at a very young age, still just 25 years old. This could be a very different conversation even 5 years from now. If he doesn't age well, if injuries bog him down, there are a number of things that can happen. But for what we know right now, Vladdy Jr.'s got to be on the list. He was my last player in that section as well. I do not have any cards to show of Vladdy Jr. What years is rookie Dom?
He is in the 2020 Series 2. He has a no number short print, so it doesn't have an actual card number in the set. And that can be found in a PSA 10 for about $50. I have a saved search for it right now. I'm hoping to just find a 9 for ridiculously cheap, but relatively affordable. And part of it's because he doesn't have even the accomplishments of an Acuna and a Soto at his age. Him and Devers rookie cards go for significantly less than Soto's and Acuna's.
Mm-hmm. Now, we may have flip-flopped kind of the sections that we put next, because my next section that I have is overlooked mid-career guys. Now, this first guy I have on here, he's a little bit older, but he recently signed a very long-term contract, which gives him a chance to hit the secondary qualifiers of 2,500 hits and 1,500 runs. And it's a former Boston Red Sox, current shortstop / second baseman for the San Diego Padres, Xander Bogaerts. I think he was always kind of overlooked in Boston for where his career was at the point that it was, for his pace in terms of a Hall of Fame resume in the future. And I think he's someone that's slept on now, kind of forgotten in San Diego. He signs that big contract, and it's kind of it. You know, it was more negatively talked about than positive for Bogaerts of how many years, you know, what are they going to be paying him when he's how many years past 40, you know, all that kind of narrative. When in reality, if he's able to produce at a, you know, above average player for the life of that contract, there's a decent chance he hit these metrics and could become a Hall of Fame worthy player. I know Bogaerts is kind of your guy, another Bostonian there. What do you think about Bogaerts?
It's funny that you let off with Bogaerts is kind of your guy. I love Xander Bogaerts. I think he's a winner. I think he works hard. I think he's a very good hitter. The defense has always been a question, and accumulating the WAR that you like to see for these mid-career guys, I actually put him in the tier when I just started kind of like trying to fill out my 40. I left him in that tier. I actually don't have him in my mid-career guys tier, which you seem to have him at the top of. I'm not saying he can't accumulate during that phase enough to be a Hall of Famer. He's still on my list of 40. I think he can and will get Hall of Fame votes, but he's playing in a park that is not power friendly, and he's not a power hitter. So I feel like he's going to continue to fly under the radar for many years to come. And I think that could happen with Hall of Fame voting too. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being one of those guys that we talk about is like, why isn't the Hall of Fame considering Xander Bogaerts? And part of it's going to be because I have a couple shortstops in this mid-career tier that I think stand out more than Xander Bogaerts does and have the ability and age on their side to be able to compile better Hall of Fame cases than Xander as well. He's not going to stand out as the only good shortstop that hit these numbers during his era.
And while I have him in this group, he was closer to being cut from my 40 than it may seem like. Now, he got grouped in here because he is mid-career, and that's why I put him in this section. And not that he's going to wind up anywhere remotely close, and for the same reasons as a Beltran, because I'm very much a Carlos Beltran guy. But a similar feel for someone who's currently on the ballot, who I believe is a Hall of Famer, that like people don't necessarily always think about that he was. Even mid-career, who was talking about Carlos Beltran like, oh, that guy could be a future Hall of Famer. I think he's along those same lines. But I do have him on my list of 40, at least for now.
Yeah. And in this kind of, I don't have it mid-career. I just have keep up the great work as my section for this, because I think there are guys that are on the path to get Hall of Fame votes. And the top of that list for me is Aaron Judge. That's where I thought you were going when you said he signed a long extension. 9th season, 41.6 WAR in less than 9 years, because he's in his 9th season. He's the Yankee captain. He's larger than life, both physically and the story of him. He has the 62 home run season, but he signed through 2031. So he's going to push for 500 home runs. He's only 41 away from qualifying for me at 300. And he should also be able to reach my qualifiers for RBIs. He has 578, runs 619, all-stars 5, and a WAR over 60. He would be higher on this list if he didn't debut at 25. He has zero shot at 3,000 hits or 600 home runs. Not that he doesn't have the talent to do so, but he has zero shot at hitting those. But he's going to have 400 plus home runs. He's going to have 1,000 plus RBIs and runs scored. He's going to have close to 2,000 hits. He might actually fall short of the rule of 2,000, depending on his health. But I think even if he's in the 18 or 1900 range, like your boy Andrew Jones, he's put together enough of a prime where if he ages fine the rest of the way, when he's on the field, he's one of the best players in baseball per at bat. He's going to be a Hall of Famer.
I have Aaron Judge in a different category. Mine is called home runs or bust, is where Aaron Judge is, because that's the truth. Yes, he has the 62 home run season. Yes, he does have an MVP. He has some hardware. He started so late in his career. I think he needs a combination of another MVP, another 2 or 3 big seasons, because he's had health concerns. He's missed many games here early. Aaron Judge is a big man. How is that going to go carrying forward throughout the life of this contract? That being said, I think he's got a really good shot to hit 400 home runs. And even if I might not quite vote for him if he didn't get to 500 homers, but he has that 400 plus with a 62 home run season, with an MVP, picks up a few more all-star appearances in pinstripes, good chance, real good chance that Aaron Judge is a Hall of Famer someday. So I do have him on my list.
And I'm going to push back here, even though we both agree on him being on the list. Giancarlo Stanton is a home run or bust case going for 500.
Agree.
Pete Alonso, who's also on my list that I don't really want to talk about that much, he's pacing for 400 to 500 home runs.
He's in the same category as Judge for me.
But that's the thing. Look at their WAR. Aaron Judge is a superstar. He is a all-around player. In 9 seasons, he has 3 less WAR than Giancarlo Stanton does in 6 more seasons, and he's missed games in those seasons.
Mm-hmm.
He is another level of slugging star than those home run only guys are. So I don't want to, even though I'm not a Yankee fan at all, I don't want to discredit the kind of player Aaron Judge is and rope him in with guys that are strictly home runs as a case.
Qualitative, I 100% agree with you. I'm not going to push back there. However, I will push back on the quantitative portion. There's almost no shot other than home runs that Judge even reaches the level of Stanton in some of those counting stats. Like, you're familiar with my Hall of Fame tracker. I've shared it with you. We've looked at it. We've talked about it. Like, Judge is only on pace to hit a secondary qualifier of 400 homers. He will not hit 1,500 RBIs, barring great end of his career. Not going to hit 1,500 runs. You even said yourself, he's not likely to even get to 2,000, much less 2,500 hits. So because I lean milestones, because I lean longevity, and it's not that Judge is not a great quality player, because I believe he is. He wouldn't be on my list if he wasn't. Because he started so late and then he had injury problems already, he's just not going to meet some of those thresholds. Do I think he's going to wind up being a Hall of Famer at this point? Decent odds. He's right in the middle of my list. But I also push back a little bit that I think he's still a little overhyped because he's not going to reach some of these milestone numbers in comparison to guys who are in the Hall of Fame who have.
Yeah, I mean, saying he's overhyped is one thing, but I just didn't want him to kind of get swept under the rug with guys that are great hitters, but are really just home run or bust. Because I think Aaron Judge is more than that. And I think that's why, even if he doesn't hit the rule of 2,000 hits, is going to get serious Hall of Fame consideration for like the overall package that he was, playing center field at his size, running the bases the way that he does, the arm he has in the outfield, like all those different things are going to play part in it. Being in Yankee Stadium, all rise, number 99, beat Maris's record. Those things are all going to matter too. So I have his 2017 Topps update with him fielding on my eBay Save search, and it's a card that I plan to pick up in the next couple years because I think he is well on his way to election.
I have no Judge stuff. He needs to get to like 450 home runs, and then I'll buy one.
You might be waiting a little bit then. He's not at 300.
I know.
But I didn't expect to be the Aaron Judge defender as the Red Sox fan of this podcast, but that ended up happening. The next guy I have in the section before I get into the shortstops that I prefer over Xander Bogaerts, Hall of Fame wise, is probably the most overlooked superstar in the game, and that's Jose Ramirez. 12th season, 46.1 career WAR, and he's signed through 2028. So by the end of his contract, he's going to be close to a bunch of qualifiers for me. Hits, he has 1342, home runs 218, RBIs 756, runs scored 796, and he has 202 career stolen bases. He's going to have a WAR over 60, and Jose Ramirez is literally a year where he goes crazy and wins an MVP in his 30s like Freddie Freeman and Paul Goldschmidt did, to people being like, oh yeah, Jose Ramirez is a Hall of Famer. He's been one of the best players in the American League for a decade. And I think that he's going to get his flowers at some day, even if it's not through an MVP award.
I have two guys on the list. Jose Ramirez is one of them that I almost wrote the exact same note for. The other one is, I believe, a shortstop that you're also going to have on your list. It's Francisco Lindor. They're only separated by a year. Both of them are currently on a pace to hit. I think they're going to hit at least two of these four secondary qualifiers to get them in. They're both on pace to potentially get to 400 homers, 2,500 hits, 1,500 runs, 1,500 RBIs. They've both got some hardware with some silver sluggers, some all-stars that they're likely to add to going forward. And in some way, I think both of them are going to hit at least two of those to make them Hall of Famers. They were fairly easy to put on this list. I don't have either of their rookie cards though yet.
I have Ramirez's. It's 2014 Topps update. Actually, no, he might just be Topps. I believe Ramirez is just 2014 Topps, and Lindor's is 2015 Topps. I have that as a save search as well, because Lindor is one of the three shortstops that I have to round out this category, and I'm going to name the other two and see if you have them on your list as well.
All right.
Corey Seager.
I do have Seager.
And Trey Turner.
I do have Trey Turner.
Okay. I think all three of these guys, Lindor, Seager, and Turner, are more likely to get Hall of Fame support than Xander Bogaerts. I'm not saying all four won't be deserving and can't get in, but I think that there's going to be a little bit of a line going here with these guys. Lindor, 10th season, he's going into 42.4 career WAR. He has an infectious smile and plays in New York City, signed through 2031. He has 1,328 career hits, 216 career homers, 681 RBIs, and 791 runs scored. He's an amazing defensive shortstop and had the quietest 30-30 season of all time last year. I know he's struggling to open the season, but he'll be just fine the rest of his time in New York, compiling a very strong Hall of Fame consideration case.
So I'll talk a little bit about one of the other players you mentioned, then Seager. Since he's from the Tar Heel State, he's a North Carolinian like myself. Now, Seager, he may not be on pace for a lock for as many potential secondary milestones like a Lindor or a Jose Ramirez. However, he is on pace to potentially get to 400 homers and possibly 2,500 hits. He's at 171 and 1,033 respectively at age 29. He does have 3 Silver Sluggers. He does have 4 All-Stars. Something key for Seager, though. We talked about narrative a little bit with Aaron Judge. Seager has been a World Series MVP now on 2 different teams, the Dodgers and the Rangers. And I don't think that's nothing. I think that's something. I don't put a ton of stock into postseason accolades, but to be one of the key guys on 2 different teams, to lead 2 different franchises, 2 World Series, kind of a big deal. Seager also, I'm sure you were going to talk about this. I may be stealing your thunder, Dom, but go look at the season that he put up in a partial season last year. Somewhat was in the MVP conversation with what he was able to accomplish.
He finished second, and he missed 40 games.
Right. And Was he realistically going to win it? No. But he was a closer second than you may thought someone could ever get by missing 40 games. He had a great season. If Seager can stay healthy on a good team in Texas, I think that he really does have a great shot at putting together a Hall of Fame career. He's from right down the road in Kannapolis, North Carolina.
Well, I'm assuming that means you had Seager on your list last year.
I didn't.
Okay, because he just missed mine last year, and the reason I left him off was his injury history that he has, which is why you saying he's on pace for 2,500 hits and 400 home runs. I'm like, no way he gets there. He might get to mine. He might get to my qualifiers, but I don't think he gets 400 and 2,500. But what you said, the 2 World Series runs, including an NLCS MVP, that kind of postseason legend has gotten many guys over the hump with the Hall of Fame. And I don't think his career numbers have to be as gaudy as 400 home runs and 2,500 hits for him to get serious Hall of Fame consideration. If you're telling me Xander Bogaerts has 22 more home runs and 500 more hits than Corey Seager, and they're both on the ballot, Corey Seager is going to have more people checking his box than Xander Bogaerts. And that's just the sad truth of it, that his 77 postseason games next to Reggie Jackson, it is a mirror image of Mr. October. He is a man possessed in the playoffs. He had, like you said, a second place MVP finish last year to get him back on track to getting respectable career totals. He made me feel silly for not putting him on my list last year. I jumped him all the way up to the second shortstop.
He launched himself into my list with the amount of pace that he made up with his season last year, despite missing 40 games. And I say he's on pace for those. He has a weird birthday, how it falls, age 29 season, whatever, when baseball starts and when his birthday is. Besides the point, it's a slim chance to hit those. But his qualitative numbers have been good. He's had injury problems, but he came back a man possessed last year. And that second ring with the second franchise, second World Series MVP, can't leave him off the list of 40 at age 29. There's too much time left in his career where he could steal an MVP, where he could put together a couple more great seasons. And then we're talking about another playoff run. And then we're talking about a qualitative case, a peak case that is likely to be a Hall of Famer. So I couldn't leave him off the list.
Agreed. And the final guy I want to touch on, who I think is also a better bet than Xander Bogaerts, is Trey Turner. And it's simply because he's playing in a big market and he has a more all-around skill set than Xander Bogaerts. Xander Bogaerts, like I said, the defense has always been a question. Trey Turner plays above league average shortstop. And he also is very close to my stolen base threshold of 300. He has 264 career stolen bases. He was the only player in baseball last year to steal 30-plus bags without being caught once. He is a really good base stealer, and it was part of the reason he got the big contract, 11 years from Philly last offseason. He's going to be able to compile. He has 1,217 hits, 693 runs scored, and an outside chance at 300 home runs. He's currently halfway there, $150. He's a true all-around player, and I think he's going to be appreciated more over time in this qualitative age of how valuable a player is. He has 32 career WAR so far in his career, and a guy that I bought his rookie card raw for $3 on eBay. And he's better than the majority of guys that have played 10 games in the major leagues that you have to buy the rookie card for $5. So Trey Turner to me is super unsung right now, but is way closer to the Hall of Fame than he's being priced at.
I also have Trey Turner on my list. I love stolen bases. I love speed players. I love watching them play. Turner I have on my list because my threshold for stolen bases for a secondary qualifier is 500. I do think he can get there. I also have him on pace to have an outside shot at 1,500 runs scored. So that would make up a Hall of Fame career for me. Something that is often forgotten. I'm sure you knew this, Dom, but people out there may not realize it or remember. He has a batting title. Trey Turner has a batting title. And when it comes down to a guy that may end up being a borderline case, something like that in your trophy case will matter. That's, one player a year in each league gets that. Like an MVP, like a Cy Young. So I do think that batting title could end up being something that pushes him over in the end. We'll see.
Yeah, and he didn't go Corey Seager in the postseason, but he was a big part of the 2019 Nationals World Series title as well, a team that has only one title. So he will definitely have that remembrance in his resume as well. And that Philadelphia team has a very good shot of winning a title in his tenure there as well. So he could add to that legacy of a winner, which will, I think, help him. Kind of like Bogarts has the 2 World Series in Boston. But we don't know what's going to happen with San Diego. These World Series titles are going to factor in. They might not be the only thing, but they could help get someone to check a box that might not have otherwise on these guys that don't have gaudy numbers, but have very respectable, deserving numbers.
And funny you mentioned Philly there because I'm going back to Philly with my next player.
And God.
It's another pitcher.
Yeah, I know.
Aaron Nola is who I have next. I don't have a rookie card to show off of him. And there's not a ton of pitchers that historically make the Hall as compared to hitters. And Dom and I soon, we've hinted at it a few times, will soon do an episode about what we think will make a Hall of Fame pitcher in the coming era. But in terms of Nola, he's at 90 wins and over 1,500 strikeouts at age 30. At least that puts him on a pace for an outside shot at 200 wins and is on a slightly better pace. He's got a pretty good K rate for a shot at 3,000 Ks. Now, if he has a long and successful career on a successful team in Philly to be able to rack up some of those wins, there's not a lot of great bets at pitcher past Garrett Cole, but I felt like Aaron Nola was the next guy up. So he's on my list.
Yeah, after Garrett Cole, I only have relief pitchers the rest of the way on.
No starters, no more.
It's because I'm not confident in any of them outside of the ones that have already locked their place and Garrett Cole. In terms of putting a number on, I think the everyday players have a much better chance of staying healthy enough and compiling Hall of Fame worthy numbers. But Aaron Nola is someone I think that will get appreciated more over time, a guy that eats a lot of innings and has compiled a good amount of strikeouts. But Hall of Fame, I don't know if the bar is going to drop that far, man. I just really don't.
Well, see, now he does have an outside shot at 3,000 Ks.
I don't think he gets there.
Outside. Well, let's say if he gets to 200 wins and 2,500 Ks, yes?
He'd have a solid argument.
Okay. I think if he gets there, he's a yes. But there's no guarantee he gets there. There's 110 more wins in 10 or less seasons. That's an average of 11 a year. I know that. I did all the math, but I had him as a pitcher on my list, and I have one more, but I'll save him and pass it back to you for now.
Is it another Philly, or is it a Brave, or is it?
Can't give that away. Can't give that away.
Oh, we're about $1.30 into the podcast. I feel like you can give things away, but I mean, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer with the pitchers. I have those lock pitchers, Garrett Cole, and the 3 relievers that I talked about. I feel like we glanced over Pete Alonso.
We did.
I want to just cover him briefly. He's similar to Vladimir Guerrero and Rafael Devers in terms of wins above replacement in his first 6 seasons. He's at 17.3, but he came up older, like Aaron Judge did, and he's strictly been a home run hitter. Won a Rookie of the Year, won 2 home run derbies, and has matched 195 homers so far in his career. He's going to be remembered for that long ball, and if he keeps his pace, he can reach 500. I think he'll at least have 400 home runs. I do think that the fact that the Mets didn't extend him long-term hurts his Hall of Fame chances just a little bit. But we'll see. Maybe he goes to another team and hits a big home run in a playoff run for another franchise and gets remembered forever as another thing. But to me, him being like the Mets slugger for 15, 20 years would have been really good for his Hall of Fame chances.
I also have Alonso on my list for all the same reasons. I was okay with glancing over him because he's a Met. And dude, that guy, as a Braves fan, that guy. But we'll move on. I'll go to my next pitcher, Dom. Okay, I needed everyone to think about that for like 2 minutes, and I was more confident in this until about, I don't know, 2 weeks ago before we shot this. Spencer Strider. Yes, he is having Tommy John. Yes, he is going to miss all of 2024. Yes, he will likely miss the first month at least of 2025. But the man has 491 strikeouts through 325 and 2/3 innings pitched in his first 3 years. He's 25. When he comes back, he'll be 26. His career K9 is 13.4, and he did all that, other than his 2 starts this year, with 2 pitches. I wrote part of this before he got hurt, but he added a curveball this offseason, and it looked devastating. And even looked good in his first start. Before his second start, he was clearly hurt. I'm going to leave him on here for now. He could easily completely drop off my list if he comes back next year and he's not the same. But in terms of pace, at such a young age, to have another pitcher on here, and when I was really kind of grasping for straws at the end, I just couldn't leave him off. Maybe it's my Braves bias coming through a little bit, but I just couldn't leave him off.
I think it is a little bit. Spencer Strider was my National League Cy Young pick because of that curveball. I felt like adding a third pitch, he could lower that ERA with the same kind of strikeout numbers that he's known for putting up. But Spencer Strider, Garrett Cole, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, Clayton Kershaw, Zach Greinke's not on a team. Being a pitcher for a long enough period of time, you either have to compile or have a peak. The best is both. That's why we have guys like Verlander, Kershaw, and Scherzer so high. But you have to have like a just dominant peak, which Strider got an arm issue right in the middle of what's supposed to be his dominant peak years, or you have to have longevity, and those injuries don't help towards the longevity. So it's not that I don't like Spencer Strider. I just can't, even if he was healthy, I wouldn't be able to confidently put him on this list yet. It's still just too early for me with pitchers like that because we don't know what's going to come tomorrow. But I do hope he comes back and is relatively healthy. I felt bad for you Braves fans. I felt bad for my pick, but it is what it is with the pitching landscape of today's game. We're trying to be as right as possible with this exercise. Mm-hmm. And to me, outside of Garrett Cole putting pitchers, I was just like, I don't even know if they're going to get a Hall of Fame vote. That's why I even put Chapman. I don't think Chapman gets in, but he could get Hall of Fame votes. He could even get the 5% to stay on the ballot. But I don't know if these starting pitchers can garner that much support with the career numbers that they're going to end up having.
Granted, in the last 10 or so players here on both of our lists, most of the players we're going to talk about, it's either it may be a little too early or it may be a little too late. There are no slam dunks here in the last 10.
There's one left.
We'll see. Yeah, you're right. There is one left, but it's different than yours. But there are seriously, there are no slam dunks in the last 10 here. So, we're kind of rolling the dice. This last 10, I had 6 guys fall out of my list from last year. I don't know if you kept up with that for you, Dom. But this list is going to change year to year. It's inevitable. It's part of the fun of doing the exercise.
Yeah.
How many fell off your list? And then, if you know that, and then tell me your next guy.
I believe 6 fell off my list. It might have been 7.
Okay.
I told you Xander Bogaerts I had in a different tier than those keep up the great work guys.
Yeah.
In that tier, the next guy that I have is like, I used to have the end of my list just say now I'm really reaching for 40 because I do think to an extent we are. But I have a section I feel pretty good. I don't feel good. I don't feel great, but I feel pretty good. And Xander Bogaerts is at the top of that tier. And the next name I have is Anthony Rizzo, who stayed on my list. 15th season, 39.6 WAR, so very similar to Bogaerts in terms of that. He's Freddie Freeman light, but with a better glove. That's the way I kind of look at Anthony Rizzo. He's a consistent middle of the lineup bat for over a decade. He plays in a bandbox like Yankee Stadium. He's 4 home runs away from 300. He's 66 RBIs away from 1,000. He's 110 runs away from 1,000, and he has 1,579 career hits. So he's right on like the borderline of hitting my 4 qualifiers, but he has that iconic championship with the Chicago Cubs, which I think will help him. They usually want a representative in the Hall of Fame from the iconic World Series winners. That doesn't always end up happening, but the closest one to me, position player wise, is Anthony Rizzo. There's Chapman and Lester as pitchers that both have decent chance, but position players in that 2016 Cubs lineup, Rizzo is head and shoulders career wise above the rest of them. So I think that could help him garner Hall of Fame support. And I feel pretty good having him on my list.
Rizzo is actually one of the 6 players that fell off my list. And the only reason he did, because I agree with a lot of things you said.
Yeah.
My thresholds are slightly higher. And him having a down year and only playing 99 games last year knocked him off pace for me. Now, that being said, he does play in a bandbox. He does still play for the Yankees. He has to have a bigger season between now and the end of his career to put him back on track. So I looked at him of like being very close, fell off of pace, but if he has a good, solid, maybe great 2024, he's a guy that I could see putting back on my list come 2025. But for this season, he fell just under pace for me. But I get all the reasons why you put him on. And that narrative with the Cubs, I think, does matter if he becomes a borderline case in the end.
I agree. I'm just trying to throw darts at people that I think can get votes. I don't want to go over. I don't want the 0 vote guys.
We're late in the process here. Now I'm gonna do 2 players right here. They don't really have anything to do with each other, but they're 2 of the last 3 in this section. So I want to get these guys done. One is a guy that's on a great pace, long way to go, really young. Did miss a PED suspension season, but he did crack 100 home runs at the age of 24. It's super early, all that stuff, but I do have Fernando Tatis Jr. on my list. I don't love it. It's just one of those things of like, yeah, he did start at a pretty good pace. Yes, he's pretty young. Yes, he's signed to a long-term contract. Got to pick somebody. So he's on there for me. I don't know if you have Tatis or not.
Yeah, talent-wise, he would be right behind Soto and Acuna. But he got popped for steroids, and that has been my hard line in the sand.
Yep.
So I don't think he's going to get support, and I'm not going to support him. So he didn't make my list last year. He's not making my list again. And it's a shame.
It is. I wouldn't vote for him. I wouldn't vote for him. But for the sake of the exercise in trying to predict who I think could be, he's here. Now, the other player I'm going to touch on because we missed him. My bad. We overlooked him. Even though he missed a season for injury last year, Edwin Diaz is the youngest relief pitcher that has a shot at hitting 500 saves. We are so far away from that, and so many things happen with closer, but he was on a very high pace at a very young age before he lost the year to injury, still on a decent pace. Last few guys, I've got him on my list. Edwin Diaz.
I know you're a big fan of Mets players like Edwin Diaz.
No,
but
not at all.
Is he even going to have Chapman's career?
I don't know. Dude,
I'm not saying that he can't have a good enough career to get votes, but is he even going to have Chapman's career, 1,000 plus Ks and 320 or 30 saves, whatever Chapman has?
So Diaz is currently at 207 saves. Okay.
A little higher than I thought.
He's 30 years old, and he has 665 strikeouts. So decent chance to at least have Chapman's career, I think. Now, all the things you said about starting pitchers being volatile, we don't know, all that stuff, that's even more true with relief pitchers. They could lose the feel and never close again and be a middle reliever or the setup man, right? Like so many things could go wrong. But, there weren't a lot of guys I loved here in the last 10. For his position, he was out in an early pace. So I put him on here.
Yeah, I mean, I had Kimbrel in my section of I feel pretty good. Just because of Billy Wagner's candidacy more so than his recent performance.
Right.
But I do think that Chapman and then Edwin Diaz, like that's just you're going down pegs of a position that isn't super well represented in Cooperstown. So I felt risky with Chapman. He's on I'm just filling my last section I'm filling the list out and I have hope. Those are my last two sections.
Well, hear me out on pace.
I'm filling it out.
Hear me out on pace. So, Diaz has just over 200 saves, 205, right? Kimbrel has just over 300. I think I said it was 316, right?
Kimbrel has over 400.
Sorry, over 400, right? So 200 saves, they're separated by 5 years. So that comes out to, 40 saves a year. Is that elite? Yes, very much so. Is Diaz capable of elite save seasons? If the Mets could win, yes. And he's about to be a free agent. Now, that next contract is very much going to matter for him. If he goes to a contender that puts him in a lot of save situations, if he's elite, if he pitches well for a long time, does he have a chance? Yes. And that was enough to get you in my back, 10. So there you go.
Yeah, we'll see. When we talk about the future of Hall of Fame pitchers, we'll definitely do a reliever segment to touch on that because I think it is an interesting analyzed portion of pitching.
Agree.
For the Hall of Fame. But the next guy that I have in my I feel pretty good section is Evan Longoria. And Evan Longoria, unfortunately, is not signed to a team currently. And I don't think he's going to play baseball again, but he hasn't officially retired. 58.7 career WAR in 16 seasons. Most popular player in Rays history with that iconic home run in game 162 to send the Rays to the playoffs. And he has 3 qualifiers, 342 home runs, 1159 RBIs, and 1,017 runs scored. He looks like he's falling short, though, of his 4th qualifier for me, and it's arguably the most important. He has 1,930 career hits. If he somehow joins a major league roster and gets those last 70 hits to break 2,000, I think he has a really sneaky, legit shot. If he doesn't, he's praying for an error committee. And that's like the borderline of borderlines with Evan Longoria. He's right under 60 WAR. He's right under 2,000 hits. And those are numbers that a lot of the analytic community kind of look for. So Evan Longoria, I was just trying to keep my 40 intact. And he was one of the only guys that, even though he's not on a team, isn't retired yet.
I'm a no on Longoria, but I'm not going to be super critical of you. We're in the last 10 here. So, not going to belate that point. Your thresholds are a little bit lower than mine, and he still doesn't get 4 of yours. So I think that says a lot there. But hey, if he catches on one more time, plays one more season, adds a few more numbers, maybe. The next guy that I have, because I'm saving a certain player that is still in another section that we'll talk about him at the same time. You know who I mean. But my next section is the title is Old Dogs That May Be Closer Than You Think. Now, you're going to give me a hard time, but I don't care. I've got another former Red Sox pitcher, Chris Sale.
Oh, man.
Here we go.
We're done with pitching.
So he's 35 years old. He has 121 wins and 2,202 strikeouts, 7-time All-Star. Okay. I'm not going to read too much into how well he has pitched so far, super duper early in 2024. Does he have to recapture some level of being good? Yes. Does he have to rack up some wins here late in his career, steal an all-star appearance or two? Yes. But he's less than 300 strikeouts away from 2,500, which isn't nothing. And if somehow he can accumulate 30 more wins, 30 more, and get to that 150 range, does he have the hardware, the Cy Youngs, those kind of things, even if he has, 8, 9 all-star appearances? No. Would he be the bottom end of what could be a new look of a pitcher from this generation? Maybe. That's why he's here, because his K number is so high, and now he is on a team that should be good. And if he's pitching well, give him a lot of chances for wins to push him over that at least 150 threshold. Ideally, he want it somehow creep up towards 200, but that's not realistic. He'd have to go the Verlander route and pitch to 40 and beyond, which we can't realistically predict that for anyone. But I do have Sale on here.
I love Chris Sale. I know since he's joined the Braves, you've been drinking that smoothie over there. But, man, he was a Hall of Fame talent. The injuries got him.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say the same thing about Jacob deGrom, who fell off my list.
Mm.
The injuries, there's better pitchers with hardware outside the Hall. And I just don't. Chris Sale might get some support, but he's not going to get elected, even if the bar drops a decent amount, just because of, like you said, the wins, the innings, the strikeouts. He's a fantastic strikeout pitcher, but I don't think he gets 3,000, and I think that's really his only prayer. He was on probably a 3,500 pace at one point, but it's a shame the way things went with him. I think he'll be productive for your Braves while he's on the mound. I don't expect it to be 30 starts every year.
I don't either.
But I do think that he can contribute, and if he adds, like we said with the Aroldis Chapman, helping win another World Series, if he helps the Braves win a World Series and he helped my Red Sox win a World Series, then you might get the 5% support you need to stay on the ballot and be relatively relevant. But I don't think he's going to garner election support with the way his career went.
In his realm of outcomes, I'm putting him on here. I know this. I'm putting him on here in the 1% chance outcome that he has a great finish to his career, adds another ring, gets to 2,500 plus Ks, adds another all-star or two, gets to 150 wins. That's a whole lot of ifs at age 36. So it is what it is.
Last but not least, in my I Feel Good segment, I feel pretty good. It's a guy who has become almost like my spirit animal, and that is Senior Marcus Semien. This is a guy who 12 season, 42.4 career WAR. And I say 12 season with an asterisk because he came up with the Chicago White Sox early and was in kind of a reserve platoon role for the White Sox that just, for whatever reason, didn't develop players. Shocker with where they stand today. And he got his first major league hit off of CC Sabathia. And do you know who fielded his first career hit in right field during that game?
No, I have no idea.
Hiro Suzuki. So the two guys that are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers in next year's class were part of Marcus Semien's first career hit. Off of CC Sabathia, he went the other way off of a Hall of Fame pitcher fielded by a Hall of Fame right fielder. Fun fact. Since he joined the Oakland A's, he has been one of the most overlooked players in the American League. And I think in the last 4 years has turned into one of the best players in the American League. This is a guy who had a 7.3 win season just last year in 2023, had the most at-bats in a season in the last 6 years between postseason and regular season. And he just posts. He has not missed more than 3 games in the last couple of years. I don't know what's in the water down in Texas, but Adrian Beltre aged like fine wine down there, and I see the same thing with Marcus Semien. Since 2019, he is slashing 272, 336, and 485, averaging 175 hits, 32 home runs, and 94 RBIs, and 114 runs per 162. He's signed through 2028, and I expect him to legitimately push for my qualifiers. He has 1,366 career hits, 216 career home runs, 676 career RBIs, and 815 runs scored. Doing this paired with him moving from shortstop to second base, which we talked about earlier, very underrepresented in the Hall, I think gives him a legitimate chance for a guy who's going to have a sneaky high WAR total, really good overall stats, and a guy who was hitting leadoff and playing every day for one of the best lineups in baseball here in Texas. The first year he played second base in Toronto, he broke the record for most home runs hit in the season by a second baseman, 44. I just feel like he is the most overlooked player in baseball when you're talking about the Hall of Fame, because like you said, there's going to be some guys we talk about that don't have a lot of time in the show. Marcus Semien has over a decade in the show, and he's aging like a Hall of Famer, even though he didn't get the hot start, and putting together what I think is a very sneaky career. So I have his 2014 Topps Update rookie card, and I am super into following his career because I think it's just so interesting.
Marcus Semien wishes he had the lost time that Ozzie Albies did have at the beginning of his career. Mr. Semien is not on pace to meet any of my qualifiers, which are higher thresholds than Dom's. Ozzie Albies is on pace at age 27 to hit 4 of the secondary qualifiers. Ozzie Albies, across the board, per 162, has better averages than Mr. Semien. This is very much an interesting conversation that Dom and I have because they are at two different points in their career. Dom likes to say, well, Semien is who Albies wants to be when he grows up. Well, I would say that Albies is who Semien wishes he was and had the opportunity to be early in his career. Now, I'm not going to beat a dead horse too much. Dom and I have this ongoing joke. You guys know with Cracking Cooperstown that Dom and I go back and forth with Semien and Albies all the time. I put my money on Albies, and Dom would put his money on Marcus Semien. And it's going to be a lot of fun in the coming years as they're both still active. And then when they both eventually do hit a ballot to see where they land, so that one of us, me or Dom, it can either be like, I told you so, or we both get to celebrate them as future Hall of Fame second basemen. But because of the weakness of the position, whether it's pace, whether it's hardware, these players are different, but they both definitely deserve to be on one of our lists because I don't have Semien and he don't have Albies.
Albies is a very good hitter. I've told you this. He's a very good hitter. The separator to me between Ozzie Albies and Marcus Semien is the overall game. And I'm not saying that Ozzie Albies won't end his career because he got an earlier start with more hits or more statistics in certain categories. But the defense and the overall game, we're talking about how analytics are viewed in the sport. Marcus Semien having these 5, 6, 7 win seasons, I don't care what age they come at, it's even more impressive. I'm going to give him credit for them happening in his 30s as opposed to docking him for it. He's going to have a really sneaky high WAR total. And when you look at defensive WAR by second baseman all time, Marcus Semien is in the top 30, and Ozzie Albies is, I believe, in the 110s or 120s. There's a significant gap in the defensive value between Marcus Semien and Ozzie Albies. And I know that isn't on the back of the baseball card. I know it's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it's going to matter for this voting base. And the WAR total for Ozzie Albies, even if he plays a longer career, I don't know if it's going to be as staggering and have as high of heights as Marcus Semien has shown he can have.
I think if let's say for argument's sake that we're both correct, okay, that Simeon's continues enough pace late in his career, qualitatively, that he ends up being a Hall of Famer, and that if Albies, because of quantitative over long term, because of his pace and early start, ends up being a Hall of Famer, would you agree that you point to Simeon and say that's a peak Hall of Famer, but you point to Albies and say that's a milestone Hall of Famer?
What
I
kind
think
of
they're the same position, okay, but I think if either and or both of them get in the Hall of Fame, it's going to be for two different reasons. I don't think
you can say that's the most logical thing you've said this whole time, is that they are two different cases, even though they're played the same position. But what kind of milestone do you have Ozzy Albies reaching that would make him a milestone Hall of Famer? Because to me, milestone Hall of Famers is the milestone clubs. It's 3,000 hits, it's 500 home runs, it's stuff like that. And Ozzy Albies, I don't believe, is on pace for any of that. If he was, I wouldn't be arguing you this hard.
Quantitative. I shouldn't have said milestone. Quantitative. My milestones. Misspoke, Dom. I'm sorry. And most logical thing I've said, that's just because we don't agree. Okay.
No, it's a lot of fun. And I'm sure all of you that have listened this far knew this was coming. And we're expecting it. And I hope you guys pick sides. There's always room on the Simeon bus for all of you to join me. And I'm sure Jake wouldn't mind a friend or two every once in a while for his little Albies wagon that he's got going. But rounding out the list here, I now just have a section that is called that my filling out the list was literally just Aroldis Chapman and Yordan Alvarez, who I had on my list last year. He is a DH pretty much. I know he plays left field. And while he is a scary hitter, he has 19.2 career WAR in 6 seasons. So not good, not bad. He's their biggest star, not tainted by the 2017 scandal in Houston. He's AL Rookie of the Year, ALCS MVP, and he is on pace, I guess, to have a decent amount of hits, 531, homers, 133, runs, 333, and RBIs, 392. I'm not sure if he's going to have those gaudy seasons that get him into the major milestones that we like to see. And I feel like that's what makes a DH a strong candidate as opposed to a he could get votes candidate. So that's kind of where I am with Yordan Alvarez. He has no defensive value, and he's not trending super strongly in any of the major milestones.
And I'm going to run through my last few names here. I know we're pushing over 2 hours. So if you guys are still listening with us, thank you. You must love cracking Cooperstown. And we've dissected a lot of guys here. And like Dom said, we're kind of in the throw and darts section at this point. So I'm gonna run through who I have left, talk about one guy at the very end, and then I'll let Dom round it out and finish us up and get us out of here. So quickly, my last few names. I've got Salvador Perez. If you're an avid listener of Cracking Cooperstown, you'll know both Dom and I agree that what makes a Hall of Fame catcher is changing. He's got 5 Gold Gloves, 2 away from a secondary qualifier of 7 with me, 8 All-Stars, just 2 away from a secondary qualifier. He's 33. He may be the last workhorse catcher, so I've got him here late. Then a few young guys, trio of young guys here before I talk about my last guy that are on a good pace, being very young, great start. Julio Rodriguez, Bobby Witt Jr., they're both 23 years old. Great early pace. Here on the last 2, I've got Bo Bichette on my list. I don't love it. He's, a career 300 hitter. He's not on as good of a pace. He's going to have to pick it up a little bit to make up for starting a little bit later than those guys. But somebody I like. I think he's a well-rounded player. The last guy at my 40 spot, if Jared, average baseball Braves fan, Braves collector, is still with us, he's going to enjoy this because I really thought about Corbin Carroll in this last spot. But when I compared him to this player, I couldn't put Carroll in over him. And it's about age. I put Michael Harris on my list. I wasn't as impressed with Corbin Carroll's totals for his age as I thought he would be because he's a year older than Harris. Harris just turned 23 about a month ago. But Harris has more homers, more hits, more RBIs, more runs than Carroll. And Dom might grill me for picking Michael Harris as my 40th spot, but there it is.
He has more seasons too.
Yes, he is, but he's still younger. So earlier start, I put him on there.
Oh man, Chris Sale and Michael Harris at the end. You really went homer on me. So my last section is just called I Have Hope. The first name on that list has not been giving a lot of hope this season. He's a negative player so far in the young season. It's Luis Arraez. He has 2 batting titles already at 26 years old. And he's a guy that if he continues the pace that he did the last 2 years, as opposed to the start of this season, he could be a guy that has a high 2,000 or maybe even low 3,000 hit total at the end of his career. He's a true slap ball hitter and a pleasure to watch. And he really stands out in today's game when everyone's trying to launch the ball. I also have Julio Rodriguez and Bobby Witt in there. And I thought about adding Corbin Carroll as my 40th player, but I was the same way with his age. It's not that he's old, but where he stands in the game, I don't know if he is a 25 home run, 50 steal player for a stretch here. So I stayed off of him and stuck with my guns. And I rounded out the list also with a catcher, but I went with the young Adley Rutschman because he may have came up late. And there are some things Salvador Perez has accomplished that Adley may not. But if you're looking at someone to have the Buster Posey peak where he steals an MVP, maybe wins a batting title, and is part of some championships, plural, he has the best opportunity with this Orioles young core out of any catcher that's coming down the pipeline. So I rounded out my list with Adley Rutschman. Didn't feel great about throwing a catcher in there, but because of our last episode of Cracking Cooperstown, I thought it was fitting to do so. Appreciate you guys for sticking this far. If you did, it's a lot of Hall of Fame talk. There's a lot of cards, a lot of players, a lot of things. Let us know in the comments below what picks you liked the most, what picks surprised you and made you think and look at Baseball Reference and maybe eBay the most, and which ones you absolutely hate. Feel free to let us know in the comments below. It'll be a fun discourse. This part of the fun with the Hall of Fame is we're not always going to agree on everything. Me and Jake probably agreed on like 24 of the 40 names altogether. And that's part of this is there might be 40 active Hall of Famers right now. A lot of them might be kids, but we're not going to know until the stories play out. So I'm Dom. And for Jake Brewer, this was Cracking Cooperstown.